Hey guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today's video is a Titan build that I wanted to share with you. It's one that I've been working on for a few weeks now, and I've mainly been waiting for Act 2 to come out and see what new additions came out with it to see how much better this build would actually get. And I'm quite glad that I did because it's one of my favorite playstyles currently in the game. In short, this build allows you to chain ignitions theoretically infinitely as long as there are enemies to spread Scorch to. This functions off of our subclass and seasonal artifact interactions, allowing us to clear an entire room off of a single ignition. The build can also boost our rocket and rocket sidearm damage by over 100%, and of course, being a solar build, has constant radiant and restoration just for good survivability and damage amplification. There's a ton of different weapons that you can fit into this build to get what you need, and I'll go over that later in the video. But for now, let's jump right into the build. Starting off in the subclass, for your super, it's really your choice, as with most builds are. Hammer of Soul just fits in better with the long-range playstyle that this build kind of incorporates, so I go with that. But you can use Burning Maul if you have a preference for it. For your Barricade, go with Rally Barricade. The main reason behind this is that Rally Barricade's base cooldown is much shorter than Towering Barricades. In addition, we also get a few more benefits with Rally Barricade, specifically in DPS scenarios, as anytime that we ADS behind a Rally Barricade, it gets us increased weapon reload speed, stability, and range. The benefits that provides are kind of minor, but again, the main reason we're using this is the faster cooldown. For your melee ability, go with Throwing Hammer. It's not that Hammer Strike wouldn't work with this build, as it would cause an instant ignition effect that could get the whole automatic ignition chaining going. In general though, I just think Throwing Hammer is a better melee, so there isn't really anything stopping you from using Hammer Strike. It's just I prefer Throwing Hammer and think it fits better. Same with your grenade. I'm personally going with a Healing Grenade because in higher difficulty content, having that instant cure option is really valuable. However, if you wanted to go with any other offensive-based grenade, you can. I personally recommend the Incendiary Grenade if that's the route you want to go, just because it's very, very good at starting those ignitions and dealing a ton of Scorch damage. For the aspects for the build, the first one we're going with is Roaring Flames. In short, this is a damage stacking multiplier that goes up every time you get a solar ability kill. At 3 stacks, it does a little over 70% more damage for all of your solar abilities. That includes your grenade, your melee, and your super. The other thing to note with Roaring Flames is that being on Titan, anytime you have Roaring Flames active, your base melee becomes an elemental punch, meaning that just getting a regular melee kill will actually proc Roaring Flames' effect, making your regular melee a solar melee and allowing you to build back into Roaring Flames and also scorch and eventually ignite targets just from your regular punch. The next aspect is Sol Invictus. Summed up, anytime you get a solar ability final blow, which does count with the base elemental punch I just went over, anytime you defeat a scorched target or any impact spots from Hammer of Soul will create a sunspot. Anytime you walk into a sunspot, it'll give you restoration and also enhance your grenade and melee cooldown. In addition, any enemies that walk into it will be scorched over time. The scorching effect that sunspots provide is enhanced by another part of the build I'll go over in a second, but this is a great way to deal some consistent scorch stacking damage from a very long range, as again, any scorched enemy that's defeated can spawn a sunspot. Next up, onto the fragments. The first one is Ember of Ashes. In short, this will give us a 50% bonus to any scorch stacks that we apply. For those that don't know, scorch stacking goes up to 100, and anytime an enemy is dealt 100 scorch stacks, it'll actually cause them to ignite. This will just allow you to apply 50% more scorch stacks, so let's say you do an ability that applies 50. Ember of Ashes will make that do 25 more, allowing it to do 75 scorch stacks in total. This is key when combined with our artifact, as well as a few other mods I'll go over here in a second, that actually allow each ignition that we do to cause another ignition. And this is absolutely key for the build. The other part of the ignition chaining is Ember of Char. In short, your solar ignitions will spread Scorch to other affected targets. Now, without Ember of Char, our ignitions through the artifact will actually have some Scorch dealing potential already, but Ember of Char is what allows us to double dip into that Scorch stacking, allowing the initial ignition to also apply Scorch, which can then cause that explosive effect. Ember of Ashes combines with this, allowing each ignition to auto-ignite enemies when they're close enough to that explosion. So again, Ember of Ashes and Ember of Char are key to make this build work. Next up is Ember of Singeing. In short, your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. This is actually a 400% regen increase, and although it's on a 3-second cooldown, with how often we're scorching multiple enemies with this build, it's incredibly easy to take advantage of, and it means that we basically get our class ability back in no time at all. The main reason we're getting our Barricade back is because of our exotic chest piece and taking advantage of its benefits, and again, this is the same reason we're going with Rally Barricade over Towering, just help get our Barricade back as fast as we can. The final one is Ember of Empyrean, which any solar weapon or ability final blow will extend the duration of restoration and radiant with this build. Restoration effect, of course, comes from Sol Invictus or our healing grenade, and radiant actually comes from the artifact perk, which means that once we have it active, Ember of Empyrean will take over and keep chaining it forever and ever without having us to continually pick up orbs of power to proc it. Onto the artifact mods. Again, I'm really going to go over the ones that I consider to be central to this build, so if you want to fit in a couple here and there or swap things out based on the weapons or your own variant of the build, feel free to do that. The first mod I want to go over is incendiary rifle rounds. Essentially hitting precision hits with a solar sniper rifle will scorch targets. This works particularly great with our exotic hazardous propulsion and ember of singeing, because sniper rifles will actually grant around 67% of an individual Exodus crash charge, meaning that if you have a good solar sniper rifle, which I'm sure we can all name at least one, it allows you to build up your stacks incredibly quickly to then benefit from more rocket damage, as well as enhancing your solar heavy rocket. The next one I want to focus on is solar fulmination, which is the second part to our chaining ignition effects, and so this is absolutely mandatory with this build. In short, it says our ignitions do increase damage and have an increased radius of effect. However, this isn't actually true. Ignitions do deal an additional damage instance, but it's kind of like an after effect. It's not exactly the ignition itself doing increased damage and an increased radius. It effectively is just adding in a secondary part of that ignition that does more damage. This was something that we first saw when it was back in the seasonal artifact many seasons ago, but it's essentially adding another layer of your ignition, but not improving the ignition itself. While this might be seen as a bit of a downside because it doesn't actually do exactly what it says, the thing with fulmination is it's actually key behind what's causing the chaining ignitions, as our initial ignition allows us to scorch nearby targets, and then fulmination, which does a similar AoE igniting effect, will also scorch nearby targets thanks to Ember of Char and Ember of Ashes, which allows us to have another ignition proc off of a singular one. And there isn't a cooldown behind this either. Every ignition that we do will actually have this same effect. The next mod I want to go over is Sniper's Meditation, which fits in nicely with incendiary rifle rounds. Effectively, sniper rifle hits grant a stacking damage bonus as well as stability and reload bonuses for a short time. The reason we're using Sniper's Meditation along with incendiary rifle rounds is for the DPS variant of this build, which just involves using different weapons. I personally like using Still Hunt or the Aikilo sniper rifle, but both of these benefit greatly from Sniper's Meditation and incendiary rifle rounds, allowing them to do a ton of igniting damage and also improve their own damage. And just in case you're curious, Still Hunt's Golden Gun shot does get the damage bonus of Sniper's Meditation, which is about 15%. I'm also using Radiant Orbs. In short, anytime you pick up an Orb of Power, it'll grant you Radiant, and then of course with Ember of Empyrean, this lets us keep up Radiant's effect constantly as long as we're getting solar ability or solar weapon kills. This is how we're getting Radiant despite not running Ember of Torches. Final mod I'm going over is Counter Energy, which in short, anytime you or someone in your fire team stuns a champion, you get 25% ability energy for your release charged ability. This is another way to build back into our barricade or to help regen our melee or grenade charge. Despite having a bunch of ways to do that already, it's just another way to dip into that ability regen. Onto the armor and the mods for today. On our helmet, I'm rocking a stack of heavy ammo finder and special ammo finder just to benefit the two main weapons we're using with this build. I'm also rocking a harmonic siphon stack just to allow any solar weapon final blows that we get to occasionally generate an orb of power. Again, this is mainly a weapon focused build, so that's why I'm rocking these three in particular. Onto the gauntlets, the first one I'm using is heavy handed. Despite this being more of a weapon-based playstyle, our melee charge is an infinite melee charge with its own intrinsic damage stacking, so it is a very easy way to generate those occasional orbs of power that we might need to proc Radiant or to refill on our surges. As far as the other mods, I'm using Solar Loader just to benefit the reload speed of our solar weapons, as well as Focusing Strike. This will just allow us to take advantage of our infinite melee charge when used at close range by granting us additional class ability energy anytime we cause damage with our powered melee attack. Next up, onto our chest piece, and our exotic for today is Hazardous Propulsion, and this is why we're wanting to generate our class ability back so quickly. In short, whenever you get precision hits or final blows with weapons, it'll eventually load up these kinetic damaging Exodus rockets. And whenever you activate your class ability, any stacks of Exodus rockets that you have are then fired and will seek out enemies based on line of sight. And whenever you damage targets with Exodus rockets, it temporarily increases the damage you deal with all other rockets. I know that was a lot of information all at once, so let me summarize it very effectively for you. Getting multi-kills with weapons or by dealing precision damage with weapons, you'll slowly fill up your Exodus rocket bars. This bar can fill up to 6 charges, allowing you to fire 6 rockets. Based on the number of rockets that you fire, it'll give you a corresponding rocket damage increase. Besides that, getting 4 kills with any weapon will also give you an Exodus rocket charge, and this also counts for the explosions coming off of stuff like Incandescent, for example. The thing to note about the rocket launcher damage buff with this exotic is it actually buffs more than just rocket launchers. While it will give a 35% empowering buff to basically any legendary and exotic rocket and all of its effects, and yes, that includes the ignitions from Dragon's Breath, this will also buff any weapon that has Wolfpack rounds, which includes stuff being buffed by Galahorn or even Ergo Sum, so this could technically improve sword damage as well. It also buffs rocket sidearms, which includes both the detonation and impact damage that it does. It'll also even buff Grand Overture's Missile Barrage, which is a very high burst DPS option. And I'm sure there's a ton of other ones I actually haven't gotten around to testing yet, but it basically buffs anything and everything that can be considered a missile except Mountaintop for some reason. So in short, if you're using a weapon that has a rocket-like projectile, there's a chance that hazardous propulsion actually gives it an empowering buff. Moving on from the exotic though and onto the mods for it, I'm using a stack of harmonic reserves just to benefit our solar weapons, again mainly our special and heavy weapon, as well as 2 resist mods that are relevant to the content of them in. Again, if you want to fit in multiple reserves or all 3 resists for higher difficulty content, you can absolutely do that too. Onto our legs, the first mod I'm using is Solar Scavenger, allowing us to get more ammo from ammo pickups. And I'm also pairing this with 2 solar weapon surge stacks, allowing us to get a 16% damage increase for our solar weapons. However, if you want to benefit from all 3 solar weapon surges, you can certainly fit that out. Again, I'm mainly adding in 1 stack of Solar Scavenger just for longer form content like Grandmaster Nightfalls. Finally, onto our mark, I'm personally using Distribution, just giving us a tiny bit of ability energy for our melee, grenade, and class ability anytime that we use our barricade. I'm also using Reaper, which guarantees an orb of power after using our barricade on our next weapon final blow, which is a big part of this build, so it's basically a free orb gen. And then I'm also using Powerful Attraction, just so anytime that we use our barricade, it'll automatically pick up any nearby orbs of power. With that said, if you'd want to swap out Powerful Attraction for something like Time Dilation, you can absolutely do that, just allowing us to have an increased duration from solar weapon surges. So feel free to mess around with the mod customization on this build if you want to fit it into a bit more different environment. Finally, onto the weapons I recommend using with the build. Again, it's mainly a rocket focused build, so pretty much any solar rocket or solar weapon buffed by hazardous propulsion works best. Like I mentioned, Dragon's Breath is just a fantastic option for this build, as not only is it being buffed by hazardous propulsion, but it also excels at scorching tons of enemies in a very large area, meaning it can take advantage of all the ignition buffing effects we already have going on, as well as stuff like Solar Fulmination, which adds on even more damage and an additional solar ignition every time that we ignite a target. So with that said, Dragon's Breath is really my go-to exotic with this build, but if you want to use something like Apex Predator, which is in my opinion the best solar legendary rocket, you can absolutely use that. Gjallarhorn, of course, works perfectly fine, and again, Gjallarhorn's Wolfpack rounds are also buffed by hazardous propulsion. As far as special weapons go, my main recommendation is Aberrant Action, which is the new rocket sidearm. This thing is absolutely fantastic with this build, not only because it can scorch enemies very reliably with Incandescent, but also because being a rocket sidearm, it also gets the 35% damage bonus coming from hazardous propulsion, as well as the damage bonus coming from Surge's effects. While there are a bunch of different roles you can actually get on this weapon, the one I'm going with is Incandescent and Field Prep. Incandescent is pretty self-explanatory. It allows us to scorch nearby enemies anytime we get a kill with this weapon. After getting 2 or 3 defeats with this weapon, it basically guarantees an ignition, which again can chain other ignitions after that. And Field Prep is just basically a improvement for this weapon. It gives it more reserve ammo, basically acting like a better version of a reserve mod for our chest piece. The other reason I'm using Field Prep is because of its unique interaction it has with Rally Barricade and how it synergizes really well with it. In short, when you're crouched, you have increased reload speed as well as weapon ready and stow speed. And whenever you activate your X's rockets for hazardous propulsion and put down your Rally Barricade, you're actually crouched automatically. And with crouching behind a Rally Barricade, you get increased reload speed, stability, and range when you ADS with your weapon, meaning that casting your barricade not only gives you that damage bonus from hazardous propulsion and sends out all those kinetic damaging rockets, but it also gives you increased reload speed, stability, and range. And automatically with Field Prep, it also gives you even more reload speed, stow, and ready speed. So in short, whenever you use your Rally Barricade with Aberrant Action out, it gives it a ton of benefits from a damage bonus, reload speed bonus, stow and ready speed bonus, range bonus, stability bonus. And while some of these benefits might not be as impactful as others, it's the fact that you're basically maxing out the stats on this weapon and giving it a damage bonus that makes it really fun to use. Besides Aberrant Action, I personally recommend 2 weapons. The first is the Aikilos Sniper Rifle, specifically the 3rd version. Again, a variety of roles you can go with on this one. I like using 4th Times the Charm and Focus Fury, or you can even use something like Still Hunt. The main reason for these 2 is to benefit from the artifact perk for Sniper's Meditation, as well as Incendiary Rifle rounds. Besides Aberrant Action, the 2 weapons I would recommend are the Aikilos Sniper Rifle and Still Hunt. In short, Aikilos is a legendary substitute for Still Hunt, but basically they function the exact same. Both these weapons get a stacking damage bonus as they deal precision damage, with Sniper's Meditation granting up to 15% bonus damage. And again, for Still Hunt, the Golden Gun shot is granted that damage bonus as well. In addition, as you land precision hits with these snipers, you're also building up Scorch stacks, which eventually lead to an ignition for even more damage. On top of all of this, as you're dealing damage with either of these sniper rifles, since you're scorching a target, you're also quickly building into Ember of Singeing, which allows you to get your class ability back incredibly quickly. Speaking of which, again, we're dealing damage with a sniper rifle, so as we deal precision damage with these sniper rifles, we're also building into our X's rockets. So in short, if you're going for more long-form content, stuff like GMs, for example, Aberrant Action is 100% the way to go. But if you're looking for something with boss DPS, the Aikilos Sniper or Still Hunt is 100% the way to go. and again feeds in greatly with the identity of hazardous propulsion and the rocket volley effects. As far as kinetic weapons go with this build, realistically any weapon that benefits your playstyle works great. You can use a hand cannon like I am, that's just a good PvE hand cannon for ad clear. If you wanted to, you could also use something like Supremacy, which is another high fire rate sniper rifle to quickly build up Exodus rocket stacks. The main drawback from Supremacy though is that it's not a solar sniper rifle, so it can't directly benefit Ember Singeing. But again, pair this with something like Dragon's Breath and that problem is pretty much solved immediately. In general though, I do want to recommend any weapon that has shoot to loot on it. The main reason is that this build is more of a long range playstyle, and shoot to loot lets you pick up those orbs of power very easily from basically any range. And these orbs again will grant you Radiant, which you can keep going with Ember of Empyrean, and they also grant you your solar weapon damage surges. All in all guys, that's the build for today. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, this has become one of my favorite playstyles on Titan currently, and I've just been having a ton of fun chaining these never-ending ignitions in basically all levels of content. It's a build that works great in both GMs and boss DPS scenarios depending upon your weapon loadout, and it's actually ridiculous how much customization you can actually put into this build and still find success with it. As always, dim link is down in the description below. I hope you guys have as much fun as I've been having with this build recently. It's quickly become one of my favorite Titan builds. In addition, thank you guys so much for your continued support in these videos. I greatly appreciate it. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.